The Falklands. A windy, remote group of islands in the South Atlantic, with way more sheep than people. Seriously, the sheep-to-human ratio is off the charts. Yet, these tiny sheep-infested rocks somehow managed to kick off a whole war. So, grab your tea and biscuits, because this is about to get complicated. So, how did this all start? Well, Argentina, sitting right over here, looked at the islands and said, "Son Nustras." They're called the Malvinas. Meanwhile, the United Kingdom, all the way over here, had been running the place for ages, and replied, "Pop, they are the Falklands, and they're British." Argentina would point at the map, showing how close they were, and the UK would point at a history book, showing how long they'd been there. This went on for, about a century and a half. Argentina would protest at the UN. The UK would politely ignore them, and the islanders, all 2,000 of them, just wanted to be left alone to raise their sheep. By the late 1970s, Argentina was in a bit of a mess. It was ruled by a military junta, a group of generals with fantastic mustaches and a not-so-fantastic economic plan. The economy was tanking, people were unhappy, and the junta desperately needed a win to boost their popularity. So, General Gualtieri and his pals looked at their map, saw the shiny little islands, and had a very bad idea. "Let's just take them!" They thought. The British are a fading power, thousands of miles away. They won't do anything. It'll be a quick, glorious victory. This plan was, to put it mildly, a huge miscalculation. On April 2nd, 1982, Argentinian forces landed on the Falklands. The tiny garrison of British Royal Marines put up a brave but brief fight before being overwhelmed. Bike in Buenos Aires crowds celebrated in the streets. Gualtieri was a national hero. The plan was working perfectly. Meanwhile, in London, news of the invasion hit like a cold fish to the face. The Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher, also known as the Iron Lady, was not amused. Her advisors told her that retaking the islands was almost impossible. It was too far, too risky, too expensive. But Thatcher, being Thatcher, basically said, "Hold my tea." In a matter of days, the UK assembled a massive naval task force. We're talking aircraft carriers, destroyers, submarines, and cruise ships hastily converted into troop carriers. It was the largest British naval operation since World War II, and it set sail south on a journey of 8,000 miles. The world watched, stunned. The Argentinian junta, who thought the British would just write a strongly worded letter, suddenly realized they might have messed up. Big time. As the British fleet sailed south, the real fighting began. The first major clash happened around the island of South Georgia, a smaller British territory nearby that Argentina had also occupied. The British retook it with relative ease, a sign of things to come. The Argentinian Navy, fearing the advanced British nuclear submarines, mostly stayed in port. However, their air force was another story. Flying from mainland bases, Argentinian pilots in French-made Super Attended jets, armed with deadly Exocet missiles, became a huge threat. They flew low over the waves, trying to evade British radar. In one famous attack, an Exocet missile struck and sank the HMS Sheffield, a modern British destroyer. It was a massive shock to the Royal Navy and proved this war would be no cakewalk. The British weren't just sitting ducks, though. Their Sea Harrier jets, capable of vertical takeoff and landing, proved to be masters of the sky. In intense dogfights, the highly trained British pilots outmaneuvered their Argentinian counterparts, shooting down numerous aircraft. It was a brutal air war fought over the freezing South Atlantic, but the biggest naval loss of the war was for Argentina. The British submarine HMS Conqueror torpedoed the Argentinian cruiser, the General Bel. The ship sank with the loss of over 300 lives, more than half of Argentina's total casualties in the war. After that, the Argentinian Navy pretty much stayed home for good. With air and sea superiority mostly established, the British were ready to land. On May 21st, British commandos and paratroopers stormed ashore at San Carlos Water. The Argentinians, who expected a landing near the capital, Stanley, were caught by surprise. But they didn't just give up. From the surrounding hills, they fought back. and their air force launched relentless attacks on the British ships in the bay, which became known as Bomb Alley. Several British ships were hit and sunk, but the beachhead held. The British troops, or Yompers, as they were called, now faced a brutal march across the boggy, freezing, and wind-swept terrain of the Falklands to reach the main prize. Stanley, carrying massive packs, the soldiers marched through punishing conditions. Key battles were fought for strategic high ground, like the battles of Goose Green, Mount Longdon, and Tumbledown Mountain. These were fierce, close-quarters fights, often at night, in freezing weather. The Argentinian soldiers, many of whom were poorly equipped conscripts, fought bravely, but were ultimately outmatched by the professional and well-trained British forces. After weeks of brutal fighting, the British had surrounded Stanley. The Argentinian commander, seeing the hopeless situation, finally agreed to surrender on June 14, 1982. The war was over. The UK celebrated a victory against all odds. Margaret Thatcher's popularity soared, and the Union Jack flew over Stanley once more. For Argentina, the defeat was a national humiliation. The military junta collapsed, paving the way for the return of democracy. The war lasted only 74 days, but it left a lasting legacy. And that's how a small, windy group of islands with a lot of sheep caused one of history's most unexpected and dramatic modern conflicts. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more simplified history.